Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to film the mid-year book Freakout tag, which I did film in 2020, but then I privated because I changed my opinion on some of the books I mentioned in that video. And then I tried to do it in 2021, but it was during the time that I was in Albania for my vacation in my home country. I just ended up not doing it because it was very inconvenient. But anyway, we're in 2022 now, and my reading year has been interesting, so we're gonna talk about that. The first question is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? So it started off great. I had a favorite book, and then during the time that school was, existing in my life, I basically did not read that much unless it was for school, and if I did read, I was reading very mediocre books that I was not enjoying at all. So for the longest time, I only had one favorite book that was from all the way back in January. But in June, things turned around, and I'm so glad they did, because I have found two new favorite books and a new favorite author, which we're going to talk about later. But the number one favorite book that I've read this year is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I attempted to read this book in 2020 and I DNF'd it. I gave it 1 star because I thought it was boring. This was actually before the pandemic started. I remember going back to return the book and the library was closing down and everybody was trying to return their books before everything shutting down. But anyway, I hated this book for the longest time, and I promised myself that I was never going to pick it up ever again, or I was never going to read anything else from Sally Rooney ever again, until 2022 came around and the show for Conversations with Friends came out, which made me decide to pick up Conversations with Friends. And I read that and I loved it, and then I read Normal People, giving it a second chance, and I loved it. To talk about Normal People is about two characters. I think you already know who they are, Connell and Marianne, and it's not about their romance, it's about their dynamic. We see them in high school, we see them in college, and it's very interesting. It's a character study, and it also has a lot of commentary on social class, which I highly appreciated. It's the kind of book where you have to read it at the right time, and when I picked it up, I was still a senior in high school. I feel like I was not ready to read that book. But now, as someone who has had 2 years of university, going into my 3rd year, I feel like I'm a different person from what I was 2 years ago. And I don't know, maybe I'll read it again in the future and I'll appreciate it more or less, or who knows. But today, in 2022, this is my favorite book of the year so far. And I'm so glad I gave it a second chance. To be honest, a lot of books are my favorites I've given second chances to. So maybe your first impression is not the right one and you'll pick it up again in the future and you'll love it. The second question is, what is the favorite sequel you've read so far this year? I'm not a big series reader. I mostly read standalones, but I did reread Volume 4 of Heartstopper this year because when I first read it, it was not out in America, which meant I read the British version on Webtoon, which is black and white, and I wanted to read the version with colors. I mean, not many colors, just like blue and different shades of like teal. I did enjoy it more the second time around, and I'm glad I read it. It's one of my favorite graphic novel series ever, so if you don't know Heartstopper, then have you been living under a rock? The show is amazing. However, I am one of those people who thinks that books are better than the show, but that's just me. The third question is, what is a book that has come out this year that you want to read? Don't really pick up books when they first come out, unless it's an author that I am completely in love with, that I will read everything else they put out. But one book that I think I will read definitely is Lapvona by Otessa Moshfegh. So again, Otessa Moshfegh is a very popular author that a lot of people love, and they mostly love My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I actually picked up My Year of Rest and Relaxation the same time as I picked up Normal People back in 2020. I did finish this book though, and I didn't like it. I actually gave it 2 stars. The main character was very unlikable. However, I keep thinking about this book, even though I've read it 2 years ago. And I actually read Eileen last year as part of Books Unbound's book club. And again, unlikable main character, not really enjoyable story, but there's something that pulls me back to Otessa Moshfegh again and again. I don't know what it is, but she has very intriguing stories that they don't really end up being favorites, but I still want to read them anyway. And then the fourth question is, what is a book that hasn't come out yet, will come out in the second half of the year, that you want to read? And there are two for this. The first one is Babel or Babel by R.F. Kuang. So she is a fantasy writer, and she has a very popular series called The Poppy War, which I haven't read because I haven't really been interested in it, but this one is a dark academia fantasy set at Oxford. It's very long, it's like 700 pages, but if it says dark academia, I will read it. So I am very, very excited to read this book, especially since it's from an author who's so famous and well-loved by so many people. And then the second book I want to read is a book I actually found out about just a week ago, I think. And it's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. So this author has read other famous books in the past, but this one, first of all, has a very intriguing cover. Second of all, has a very intriguing premise because it's about a video game. And Ariel Bissett from, again, Books Unbound, received an arc, and she talked about the beginning and how it's very intriguing. It kind of reminded me of Rabbits by Terry Miles, which I read last year, and I absolutely loved. And I want to read more books that are like Rabbits. Now, I don't think this is going to be exactly like Rabbits, because Rabbits is a masterpiece on its own, but I really hope it's something interesting that I will enjoy. Next, we have Your Biggest Disappointment. Now, if you have watched my previous videos, you know that I read a book that I had been anticipating for a very long time called Loveless by Alice Oseman, who's an author I absolutely love. And unfortunately, it disappointed me a lot. I was so excited about this book because it was a book about somebody who identifies as aroace, so aromantic, asexual. And I also identify within those spectrums, maybe not 100% aromantic, and with asexuality I'm still kind of exploring that a little bit. Will I ever know? Who knows? But I really wanted to see representation like that because we don't really see it often or at all in literature. So knowing that Alice Oseman, as an aroace person herself, wrote this book really gave me hope that this was going to be one of my favorite books of all time. But then when I read it, it wasn't the representation that let me down. It was the fact that the plot and the characters were not at the standard of their other books like Heartstopper or Radio Silence, which are some of my favorite books ever. I really wish I had appreciated it more because there were some very beautiful lines and parts, like talking about friendship and how it's just as important as romantic love, and having that support and that good circle in your life of these really close friends is something that I value in my life. But the thing is that those friends, those characters, were not as interesting to me, so I didn't love them when those scenes came around. I still am going to support Alice Oseman with everything else they put out because I have loved, absolutely loved, adored all their other books. So, yeah. And the biggest surprise, well, I actually have 3 surprises. So, the first one is Conversations with Friends, obviously, by Sally Rooney. I'm so glad I kind of convinced myself to pick up Conversations with Friends. So even though it's not my favorite Sally Rooney now because it's, at the moment, Normal People, Conversations with Friends is still one of the best books I've read all year, and I really, really like it, and I am currently watching the show. I haven't finished it, but it's good. I mean, I've only watched like 2 episodes, so how much can I say about it? I don't know. Conversations with Friends is about Frances, who is a 21-year-old bisexual Irish girl, and she goes to university, but the story takes place during the summer, so she has finished, I think, her 2nd year of university or something like that, and she has an ex-girlfriend named Bobby, who she's still friends with, and they perform poetry together. And one day they meet this couple called Melissa and Nick, and they're way older than them. They're in their 30s. The book mainly focuses on Frances and the relationship that she developed with Nick, who, even though he's married, he has an affair with a much younger woman, Frances. It's very dark at times. There are trigger warnings, so check the trigger warnings. The best part about this book is the fact that you don't love it right away, and the love kind of sneaks up on you unexpectedly. So I would read this book, like read a chapter or two and think, oh, it's fine, and then read 2 more chapters the next day or something, and like, oh my god, I love this. And then the next day I'd read like 2 or 3 chapters and like, wait, actually no, I don't like it. I hate this book. And this would like go on and on and on, like a cycle. The very fact that this book made me feel so many emotions made me realize, wait, I do love this book because it's sending me into a roller coaster right now. There are especially some very, very good lines towards the end. Like, there's one line that Frances has in her internal monologue that's like, your entire life is basically waiting for the things you want to happen, and they don't happen, and life just goes on, and you just do your stuff, and they never happen. Which was so relatable, because it's so true. Like, something I've learned in my university years is that if you want something to happen, you have to seek it out and actively work towards it, because if you just wait for it to happen, it is never going to happen. People hate this book because they hate the characters, but I personally think we have to read books about characters with flaws in order to understand our flaws better. So the second book that is a surprise is I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. And it's a surprise because, first of all, it's a young adult book, and I don't really enjoy those. Second of all, because I tried out One Last Stop in the winter, and I didn't like it, but I think it was because of the audiobook, because the narrator was too quirky, and I hated her, or them, I don't know what their pronouns are. And the third surprise was a book that I actually read for school, but it was something I initiated myself. So this book is called We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer. I was part of a seminar this semester that I just finished that was climate change, fiction, and film. In my university, you have to take 3 seminars, which are basically English classes, where you choose certain topics and then you read papers or books or articles about these topics, and you write essays about certain topics that your professor assigns. I was very glad that I chose this seminar, actually, because first of all, I'm very passionate about climate change and how we can raise awareness about it, but also because I learned so much, and part of my final research paper was to pick a topic to write a research paper about, and I wanted to write about books that are about climate change, but that are written by people who are famous from something else. So the books I chose to read for this are We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer, who's known for his novels, so not really a background that has to do with environmentalism. And the second book I read was How We Can Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates, who is known for Microsoft and, tech, not environmentalism. It was such a fun experience. It was a big project to undertake because you basically have to write a 12-page paper, but also read 2 separate books. And this is also on top of like class reading that you have to do separately, and also your other classes, and also during the end of the semester, which is hell. But it was so much fun. I actually enjoyed the books I chose myself for my own paper more than the books that were assigned for the class by the professor, but maybe because I knew I was going to enjoy Jonathan Safran Foer. I mean, obviously. So I have read before from Mr. Foer here. I've read Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which is a fiction book about a kid who lost his dad at 9/11, and I really love that book. But this was nonfiction, and I don't enjoy nonfiction, okay? I despise long, boring nonfiction books. But the thing is, this book is not boring. This book is so much fun to read, and I basically tabbed every single page because it was so quotable. This book is basically Mr. Foer's thoughts on climate change. It's written in such a lyrical and well thought out way. It's very enjoyable to read, but you also learn to think in ways you didn't think before. I think it's the only nonfiction I've given the 5-star, you know? So it was a great surprise. So the next question is new favorite author. And again, I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over, but obviously it's Sally Rooney. Conversation with Friends and Normal People are god tier. And today, actually, I just started Beautiful World, Where Are You?, which is her latest novel. And so far, so good. Really enjoying it. Will this top the previous two? Who knows? We'd love to see it. But I will, from now on, read whatever Sally Rooney writes in the future. New favorite crush. So whenever I see people that do this question, they're like, I don't get crushes on books, you guys. I'm just gonna skip this question. All booktubers out there, when you reach this question, you're looking at it, you're approaching it the wrong way. I'm sorry, but you're all wrong. It's not supposed to be a crush, because to be honest, nobody gets crushes on like fictional characters unless you're a teenager, okay? This is who would you date if you were forced to? Who would you date from all the characters that you've encountered in the books you've read? Like, who do you think you'd be compatible with? Like, it's not that hard to pick a person, you guys. Like, come on. So for me, that person would probably most likely be Bobby from Conversations with Friends, because she's so witty, but in a bitchy kind of way. And I think we would vibe so well, because I love the kind of people who are smart, but also kind of cutthroat when they converse with you. I feel like we would just drive everybody insane together, and we would be amazing. And then favorite character, I obviously really appreciate the characters from Normal People, so Connell and Marianne. Very interesting characters. I would love to reread that book again in the future and like pick out more things about these characters. But also, for my reread of Radio Silence, of course, I appreciate Frances and Aled, again, to a much higher level than I did last time. And obviously, I love them, especially Frances. It's kind of like she's my literary doppelganger, which it's so interesting. Like, I related to her on such a deep level. Book that made me cry. Oh, for this, I'm going to pick out a quote, but I need to get my laptop for that, so I'll be back. There were 2 books that made me not cry, but tear up a little this year. I don't really cry. I've only cried for a book with a little life. The first one was Heartstopper Volume 4. When I said I enjoyed it more, it was because I also cried this time. And the first time I didn't cry, which was very interesting when you don't cry for a part the first time, but then you do cry the second time. That actually happened with A Little Life as well. When I reread A Little Life, there was a part that didn't make me cry the first time, but it did make me cry the second time. But Heartstopper Volume 4, the part, I mean, this could be a spoiler. It's related to Charlie's mental health journey. Another book that made me cry, or like tear up, was Normal People, which was like, wait, what? I thought Normal People was just gonna be this book that's a character study. I knew I was not gonna swoon over their romance, because it's not a romance, to be honest. Even though people were rooting for the characters, I was like, what? Like, no, I don't care about if they get together or not. I just want to see their growth and development as characters. But when people said that Normal People made them cry sometimes, I was like, well, maybe because it's like a sad love story or something. No, I cried for something else. And I'm gonna read a quote to you guys that made me kind of tear up. It's not the kind of stuff that should make you tear up, but it did make me tear up. So Connell is talking to his counselor/therapist at university. I probably thought if I moved here, I would fit in better, he says. You know, I thought I might find more like-minded people or whatever. But honestly, the people here are a lot worse than the people I knew in school. I mean, everyone here just goes around comparing how much money their parents make. Like, I'm being literal with that. I've seen that happen. This is not the kind of quote that should make you cry. But it did make me emotional because this is very real. As someone who's an immigrant in the United States of America and has only been living here for 3.5 years and goes to a prestigious university, this is very true. This is something that happens. You don't fit in right away. And people sometimes like to compare from what backgrounds they come from. They like to ask some questions that could be invasive, like, what do your parents do for a living here? Which is a very uncomfortable question if you're an immigrant and you just came here 3 years ago. And it just hit me so hard because I know this is something that happens. Like, I've been asked these questions. I've been put in situations where I felt very uncomfortable because I know that the people I'm with are from very successful backgrounds. Parents who are doctors and lawyers and basically people who make a lot of money and people who are very well off and don't have to worry about anything in their lives. People who have mansions here and who live in cities like New York or Los Angeles or San Diego or Chicago, these big cities where you have to earn a lot of money in order to live a comfortable life, and they do live comfortable lives. And me being just from a very small country in Albania, so a country that people haven't even heard of sometimes, I'm very glad I found people who treat me for who I am and not from where I come from. And I really wish that every immigrant had that experience, but that is obviously not the case. That made me cry. So, moving on to the next question. A book that made you happy. Okay, on a lighter note, Radio Silence, my reread, made me very happy. It was an audiobook listen this time, not with my eyeballs read. I want to reread more books. As I've said, there are a lot of books that I appreciate way more when I read them the second time, like normal people, like Radio Silence. And I think of some books I've read in the past where I genuinely think I was not ready to read them at that time, like, for example, The Stranger by Albert Camus, or The Arc of Triumph by one of my favorite authors, Erich Maria Remarque, who I love, Three Comrades, by the same author. But I read it later on in my life when I was 16. This one I read when I was 14. I think I would appreciate that book so much more if I read it as an adult and not as a 14-year-old child. So I really think I do need to reread books more. Most beautiful book I've purchased this year. I mean, I don't buy books that often. I think I've only purchased like maybe 5 books. Like, I can probably count them on one hand. My most beautiful book this year is The Atlas Six by Oliver Blake. No, oh my god, we're matching. Beautiful. I first heard about this book when I was in Albania last year for my vacation. I was sitting on my bed just going through Instagram and I saw a TikTok about this book before it came out, when it was self-published, and how it was dark academia. And I was like, you got me interested. And about 6 characters who are competing in a competition. Again, you got me interested. And how basically everyone is bisexual. And again, you got me interested. And I have been wanting to read this book for so long. It's been 1 year now. And I still haven't read it. And the sequel is coming out in October. And back then I was like, oh no, if I read it now, I'll have so much time before the sequel comes. And now I only have 3 months? It'll be nothing. So I need to read this before the sequel comes out, and then the sequel will come out very soon, and I'll read that if I enjoy this, obviously. But yeah, very beautiful. And wait, I haven't actually explored it that much. So there's this. This is such a beautiful aesthetic. Like, this is what I want my life to be. And there are also drawings inside of the characters, which I haven't seen. Like, I haven't explored this book. I haven't even opened it. Drawings of characters. Well, I think the author did herself. So that's very interesting. I'm very excited. Next question. Next question is books you need to read by the end of the year. And obviously, the Atlas 6. Obviously, the new Rooney that I got. And all the books that are in my TBR list. But one in particular that I should be shamed for, that I haven't finished yet, is To Paradise by Hane Nagahara, who's the author of A Little Life. This is the only book by her I haven't read. I have read The People in the Trees, which I didn't enjoy as much, obviously. But this book is her newest book that I bought the day it came out, and I didn't read it during the school year because obviously it's a thick boy that I can't afford to spend my time on during the school year. And I did start in May, and I read book 1, which I did enjoy, and book 2, which I did not enjoy. And that has stopped me from continuing because I did not enjoy it. But I have heard the third book is the best one of all. But it's also the longest one of all. It's basically the second half of the book entirely. So I'm halfway through the book. I need to read the final part, and then I'll be done. But I don't know when will that happen. I'm in an internship right now, and I'm enjoying other things right now that I don't really want to stop reading because I'm in a kick. But after I finish my Rooney kick, maybe I'll go back to this and finish it definitely before third year starts of university, because then I'll never read this. But it's obviously not A Little Life. Nothing will top A Little Life. Like, that's already established. But we still want to give it a chance, you know? Because it's Hane Nagahara. It's gorgeous, gorgeous writing. So, yeah, that's the end of the tag. This was such a long video. I have to edit it now, which will be a lot of work. But it was all worth it because I got to talk about my favorite books and some of my least favorite books, but just good vibes, good vibes. Oh, and one last thing. When I said I read a book in January that I really loved, I'm going to add a question here that sometimes people add questions to tags, which is very fun. My question is, what is your favorite classic you've read so far this year? So, my favorite classic that I've read is Morris by E.M. Forster. So this book is a book written in 1913 or 14 that has gay representation and a happy ending. What more could you want? Such a readable classic, first of all. But also, the movie adaptation is also gorgeous. Dark academia vibes all the way. And I really highly recommend it. It's so fucking good. Like, oh my god, I can't even. I need to gush about this book so much more because it's so beautiful. And I did not expect to love it as much as I did. And I'm so glad I read it. So yeah, that's the end of the tag. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.